What's up, everybody? We are live. Today I have JD Land with me for this week's Break That Down. Super excited that you guys are joining us because JD's got some incredible work. I've had the privilege of knowing him for a couple years now, and he just keeps getting better. It's super annoying. So I'm excited to turn it over to him so that he can share his screen and show us what's going on.
Hi everybody, how's it going? So we're going to go through 5 photos here. A few of them I've already posted on the Instagram takeover this week, but I kind of just put in there that we would talk about them a little more on here because it's hard to get everything into 750 characters. So let me bring up Photo Mechanic here. All right, so we'll kind of start with this one. Kind of go through the thought process a little bit on why I did this one and how I did it. So rain shots are done all the time. It happens every time it rains out. So I wanted to do something a little bit different. So we kind of rolled the dice when they agreed to go outside and decided that I was going to free lens this. For those that have never done free lensing before, it's where you basically break a 50 millimeter. I learned all this from Sam Hurd on his website. He used to have instructions on how to actually do it, but you can, with like a Nikon 50-1.8, you can actually hot glue the aperture open once you rip the back of it off. So it gives you this really cool tilt shift effect. The problem is you kind of have to move it around inside the camera body, which can be a little bit complicated, and it gets really complicated in the rain. So this actually worked out though, because what we did was we got them out in the rain, got the settings kind of dialed in a little bit with a regular 85 millimeter set to 1.8. And then I stood under an awning right at the back of the venue, which put a white wall behind me. So when we backlit them, it actually provided fill light for their faces as well. So it kind of looks like there's 2 lights in this, but there's really just the one backlight, which is bouncing off of the wall behind me and then lighting them up too. The other issue with this, when you go and free lens something, is that this super thin depth of field right here, can they see my mouse?
Yeah.
So this super thin depth of field right here is nearly impossible to find in the dark. So that's why the ISO is up to 3200 so that I could keep the flash power super low. I think I was like 1/64th or 1/128th on this so that I could just keep firing off frames while I moved the actual lens around in the camera body. Just kind of hoping that I came across one where they were sharp across this plane of focus, which worked out okay. So yeah, that's kind of how this one was done. I don't know if I missed anything, Easton.
What's one thing that, if you could go back and change something, what would you change?
For this one, I don't know if I would change much. You're kind of restricted when you're doing something like this with the free lens stuff. The wall was a happy accident, so I kind of learned from that. And I guess that's something good to take away from it, is kind of figuring out why photos are different. So when I got home, I noticed the fill light on this photo was different than what you would normally get when you just backlight somebody. So there was a mental note that you can kind of sock away and down the road keep in your back pocket for when you're doing other situations like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of learned something similar to that from working with Todd Laffler. I was second shooting for him, and excuse me, and we had like a full sun out kind of day, and we were about to shoot the wedding party, and he just he positioned them facing a church that was a white church, and so we had this beautiful light coming from the trees behind them, and then that light was hitting the building and then filling their faces in, and it just looked like a beautiful 2-light setup, but it was really just that backlight coming in from the sun.
Yeah, and it's those little kind of things you can do, and happy accidents, I call them sometimes, where you learn some new tricks that you can keep in your bag going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also if you are going to attempt this and free lens in the rain, just be really careful. This was kind of dumb. I got lucky, but yeah, be careful.
Right. Awesome.
All right.
Second image.
So this photo I kind of put in here just because I like to go through the way that I like to light photos. With this image, I was thinking more along the lines of I wanted to get that grand-esque city feel. So a lot of people that shoot around here in Philly kind of know where this is, and people shoot under here all the time. And I wanted something that showed a little bit more of the architecture and the really cool side of Philadelphia that not a lot of people get to see. So when I put them on that stairwell, they were in a dark spot. So the light's coming in from camera right over here, and it's hitting this pillar here, and then kind of bleeds up here a little bit onto the railing on the stairwell, but it was really missing them. So I set my ambient for what I wanted the exposure to be, which ended up being ISO 800, and then aperture 4.5, shutter speed was 1/160th. The aperture, it stopped down because I want to show the architecture off, which means I don't want it to be blurry. So there's nothing wrong with stopping down. And then we put I was actually by myself, I think, on this wedding day. So I put the camera stand over here behind this pillar, and there's just a light with a mag grid on it, pointed down at them. When I add the flash in, and I have no idea what the flash power was, all I'm doing is basically usually starting at 1/32 and either going up or down from there to get it to match as close as possible to this brightest highlight in here. So what that's doing is just making the scene look natural. I think this is an older photo. On the final finished photo I gave to them, I kind of burned this up a little bit so that it matched ambient even a little bit more. So yeah.
Very cool. Sometimes it's easy to like set your aperture and then just shoot that same aperture all day long for the whole wedding. And it takes you actually have to be intentional about the story you're trying to tell because your aperture plays a big role in that.
And for me, I really, really like layering photos and creating, I guess you call them frames within frames. And to do that, you really need to have more in focus than just that razor thin, wide open apertures that are so popular.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Anything you would change about that one?
I kind of wish for this one I got in a little bit further back. So, and this is something I do, and I'm sure a lot of people do it during portraits, where you get into your portrait mode and you're taking the photos and you get what you like and you think you have it, so you just leave and move on. Mm-hmm. And then you get home and you look at them and you're like, I could have got further back or closer or higher up. And so it's one of those things you always fight and try to remember to get close, to get high, to get low, to get far away, right, just to cover all your bases, especially when you have an image you know that they're going to love.
Yeah.
Cool. On to the next one.
Yeah.
So this one, this is kind of, so this is my approach to sparklers, and I actually was going to light this one, and it's funny because I did light them, and I saw it later on that the light hit her right about here on their thighs down because my color temperature on the gel was a little off. So it was a little bit bluer down here. I fixed that with the gradient, but it just kind of hammered home the fact for me personally shooting sparkler shots that you don't need to light them. You can 100% get away with no light. Sparklers are super bright. If you have enough people, the sparklers are going to provide more than enough light. And this is another one of those happy accidents I learned from this photo, is having them hold sparklers lights up their face. So it gives you pretty much super pleasing light without having to do anything. So for this one, we're at 56 millimeters on the 24-70. That's my go-to lens for weddings because it's super, super, super flexible. Weddings are fast paced. You can't always move further back. You can't always get closer in. You don't always have time to switch lenses or even drop one camera body and pick up the other, but I do always have time to zoom in or out.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you're doing it with a purpose and you're doing it with your composition in mind, 24 to 70s, I love them. So this ended up being at 56 millimeters. I'm at 1600 ISO, 1/160th, and then 2.8. But yeah, I loved the shot, and I loved that now at every sparkler shot I do, I make them hold sparklers when they run out.
Mm-hmm.
The other good thing about it is too, is when they're holding sparklers out and they're running down the line, nobody gets kind of haphazard with where they're standing and leans in a little too close and almost burns the bride's dress off because they're running through with sparklers too. So everybody's just as scared as them.
Right. That's awesome. Anything you would change about this one?
Yeah, again, I kind of wish that I had pulled out a little bit more. This kiss was natural in a way that it wasn't caused by me. So one of their guests was yelling at him to kiss, kiss, kiss. So when they turned to kiss, again, this is why I'm at 24 to 70 is so that I have that ability to zoom out. And I wish I took a couple frames here because I wanted to make sure I got him. I wish I had zoomed out and taken a few more so that I could have had a little bit more of the environment around them and then decided to crop in from where I wanted. This crop, I shoot crooked. It's an inherent issue that I cannot fix no matter how hard I try. You can see this roof line here is a little crooked. So I was a little tight, so I couldn't really straighten it out without losing these faces over here that I wanted to keep.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah. On to the next one. So this is kind of about acceptable risk, I guess you could call it. This was a New Year's Eve wedding. So they had the DJ lights that sometimes I love, sometimes I hate, but these DJs had 4 different spotlights that were rotating on pillars up here. So they were basically all 4 going back and forth. And they were pumping some fog into the room. So I knew when New Year's Eve rolled around and midnight came, you know, the photo that all your New Year's Eve couples want is that first kiss at midnight photo.
Right.
So I knew this could be a kind of cool effect because I had been playing with it while they were dancing a little bit. And I knew that if the spotlights hit things in certain ways, you could get really cool effects out of it. And that they were panning enough that as long as they kissed for more than a second, I'd have a pretty good shot at getting something cool out of it. So it's kind of planning those moments out that you know are going to happen. You can pretty much assume that a bride and a groom on their wedding night on New Year's Eve at midnight aren't going to just peck. They're going to go in for a kiss. So you know that's going to kind of give you some leeway. And of course I have my second photographer. He's actually back here somewhere. Taking some safe photos for me using flash and making sure everything's hunky-dory, which gives me the flexibility to kind of screw up. So this one is 24 millimeters. I'm on the 24 to 70 again, ISO 2000. Aperture's 2.8, shutter speed's 1/125th. And the big thing here too was this one I kind of started out a little tighter, and as he dipped her, I always keep my other eye open and kind of on what's going on, and I can barely see out of my left eye. I just can't see. So all I could see was this blob of a figure walking towards me, but I could tell he had the hat on. So I knew I wanted to get that in, and that's why I zoomed back out on them so that you could kind of add that context to what's going on. Just them kissing and with the confetti, you can kind of guess at what's going on, but when you put him in here with this hat on that they were handing out, now you can really kind of tell that it's New Year's Eve and this is, you know, their midnight kiss. So yeah, that's kind of the thought process behind that one.
Nice. And were you using any flash?
No, so I turned all my flashes off for this and just went with what the spotlights were giving me. Because if you add your flash back in, it's going to fight all this fog in front of you here, and you're not really going to see it as well.
Awesome. Very
So, and
cool.
it also is good for the couple because it gives them a photo that is really genuine to what the wedding day actually looked like.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Anything you would change?
Uh, yeah, I wish I was like two steps to the right, but there were people kissing all over the dance floor that couldn't give two craps about me. So it
Nice.
was what it was.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
yeah, two steps to the right would have been a little bit better.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, next one. Um, so this photo is kind of one of those ones where I thought I'd put in here because it's a different way to approach like a Brenizer method. Um, I've known for a while that I wanted to do a photo like this on sand dunes since the first time I was in Death Valley 3 years ago. So this couple lived out in LA. I had shot their wedding the month before. And this is kind of one of those good things to do where this is outside of how it was shot. But if you want to get into this kind of stuff, and I learned this from Charlton Churchill, he does a ton of adventure weddings. Sometimes you just got to suck it up and do it. So this couple was one of mine. They got married in October of last year, and then knew I'd be out in this area, so I told them I'd shoot them for free if they would just drive out there and do it, so that I could get this photo because I wanted this photo. Um, we got out to the dunes. It was an adventure. The groom threw up on the sand dune before we got to this one.
Oh man.
Uh, in a very dramatic fashion, so that all the other landscape photographers were staring at us as I ruined their mornings. So I basically begged him to make it to one more dune so we could get to this S curve that was way out there. But once you get out there, you kind of realize that if you're shooting this at like 24 millimeters, all of this stuff is going to be, all of the stuff back here is going to be super small. Wide angle, further away, smaller. So what I did was I had a 100 to 400 millimeter lens on me, but you could have done it with a 70 to 200. Um, I actually framed them up at 100 millimeters and then did a Brenizer and stitched it together for, I think it was 37 total photos. Um, so usually people do a Brenizer method to create that super shallow depth of field, but you can do it and kind of create the compression that you would get from a 100 millimeter lens when you're too close to do that.
Right.
So I basically created the landscape I wanted with the compression I wanted without having to go so far away that I would have lost this S curve in the photo. It kind of let me stay close enough that I could have their footprints going out and then still pull all this in. Um, so yeah, that was the thought process behind there. And again, because I don't want all of this to be blurry, I'm at f4.5. Um, yeah,
Very
so
cool.
it's okay to stop down.
I love that that you use that method specifically in this image because it's so completely different and it really does allow you to get all of that in there. You know, I don't. It definitely would not have been the same without doing it that way.
Right, and to get far enough back to get the compression you would need, you're putting too many dunes, too many peaks between you and the couple, so the photo just doesn't work the same way. So
Right.
it's a good workaround. I do it a lot. For I use the Brenizer more often for compression than I do for shallow depth of field.
Right. Awesome. Anything you would change about it?
Um, yeah, I wish they were doing something a little more interesting. I like that it gives that feel of movement, but I shouldn't have done it, but I was rushing a little bit because I knew he would pretty much died on the hike out there.
Right.
So yeah, I wish I had shot that a little more. We did have him walk up to this other peak over here. Um, but yeah, and then another good thing to do is there's another photo in this set that I had taken where the sun's coming up camera right, which is basically straight onto their backs. So when I looked over at another photographer who was taking some landscape shots on a set of dunes over here, I noticed the sun was right behind him. So there's some silhouette photos on the website that actually came from these dunes. So that's actually one of those things where I did take the time to kind of look around and see what else was available then. So even though you can't tell it's dunes, it worked out as a whole nother perspective on this set of photos.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, if you want to stop sharing your screen, thank you guys so much for joining us, and thank you, JD, for giving us this insight into what's going on in some of these awesome images.
Yeah.
Where can people find more, like follow you, Instagram, Facebook, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So you can find me, saltandsaundersstudio.com is the website. And then right now I'm doing the Instagram takeover on Art of the Second Shot. So you can find the last couple photos in there, mine. It links you right back to Instagram, Salt and Sounder Studio.
Awesome.
So,
Well, thanks again for joining us.
Find me, check it out.
Yeah. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and I will see you next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.